Reading through the Bible in one year, January 25th, Genesis 26, Matthew 25, Esther chapter 2, and Acts chapter 25. Now, there was a famine in the land, besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And Yahweh appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands. And I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven. And I will give all your seed all these lands, and by your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." Now, normally I bring this up. I didn't bring that up this time, so I'm going to kind of touch on it now. So, one of the cool things that happens is that if you were the firstborn, right, you get the lion's share of all of the blessings in the family. You're the one who receives, you receive the house and the fields and all the good slaves, and all of those things are given to you within this, within the way things are done in this time. In fact, this is even why many Muslims today, who also see themselves as an Abrahamic religion, because they see their line through Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn, they think that they really are the true ones of God because they were the firstborn of Abraham. Therefore, they get all of these things. But we see that Yahweh is different in the way that he handles these things. He chooses things that people don't expect, right? How did he refer to Isaac? He referred to him as as Abraham's only son. Abraham had other sons after Isaac, but his only son, according to promise, was that of Isaac. So when we see these things happening, we realize that it's God choosing certain people at certain times to have their to choose a lineage that he wants to use. It's not what people expect. The first one we see is as it goes from Abraham through Isaac, right? And then when Isaac has children, well, we already kind of went over that, didn't we? It's not through his firstborn, but through his second. It's through Jacob. And even with Jacob, Jacob's going to have 12 children, right? Well, 12 boys. But it's not from the first or the second or the third. It's through Judah. Again, this is all chosen by God. Now, of course, if it were up to the choice in blessings, but the choice in blessings that are given by the people themselves, as you'll later see, well, then it's Joseph and his children that should be the ones who gain the lion's share of what's given, but it's not. Because it's God who makes the choice, regardless of whatever we want, whatever we want God to do with any of these things. When we read through last year, if you haven't been through this text with me yet, we'll be there in 10 months. When we go through, no, it'll be less than that. It'll be less than that because we go through the New Testament twice in a year. It'll be probably about, I'd say 3 months. 3 months, and we're going to go through the book of Hebrews. Well, Hebrews chapter 11 is called the Hall of Faith, and it talks about all of these great people of God who have been chosen by God, and yet all of the blessings that they were looking forward to, they didn't get even the slightest bit of them. But they trusted in the promise of God that he was going to deliver it, that their life on this earth was just temporary. But they were looking forward to the promise that came from their deliverer in the time to come. This is the faith that they're looking for. This is the faith that God is looking for in people. Not to say, I'm only looking for what I get today. It's about trusting in God and his promises. He says things are going to be a certain way. And even if I die on this planet and I never see even the slightest bit of these blessings, I know that God is true. And I know that I can trust in his promises, that they will be there for my children and my children's children down the road. And that's the hope that we look forward to today. The thing that the Old Testament Christians, as I call them, right, the faithful Jewish people of that time, they were looking forward to the deliverer who was to come from Genesis chapter 3. But we, as Christians who know the deliverer, who know Christ, we look forward to the kind of consummation at the end of time, when God sends Jesus the Christ, and he takes full account, and he kind of wraps everything up. And we know that our place is with him in eternity, where we will worship and will work all to the glory of God. And that's our promise that we have today. It's nothing today. It's not cupcakes and rainbows and puppy dogs and, and whatever else. It's not every day you get a brand new Bentley, or you're flying on some jet somewhere, right? It's none of those things. It's not health, it's not wealth, it's not prosperity, it's none of those things here on earth. It's that God would be glorified through us. And so here, even in this text, we see the same thing. We see there's a promise being given, right, to Isaac. But the promise is based on the gift of his father, in that gift of faith that he had. Now, Abraham didn't, well this up within him. He just trusted in God. It's not like he had some sort of a massive act that he did. Yeah, certainly he almost sacrificed his son, but that was only a test. God never would have let him go through with it. But that was just simply a test, so we could prove he was really trusting in God, that God would provide for him a new Isaac, or that he would raise Isaac from the dead, even if he sacrificed him and burned him to nothing. He knew that God would restore him because he was the child of promise. That's all God's looking for. It's our faith in him. Just trusting that his promises are true. Let's continue now. Verse 6. So Isaac lived in Gerar. Then the men of the place asked about his wife, and he said, well, she is my sister. For he was afraid to say my wife, thinking, lest the men of the place kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful in appearance. Now it happened when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, surely she is your wife. How then did you say she is my sister? And Isaac told him, because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech commanded all the people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And Yahweh blessed him. And the man became great and continued to grow greater until he became very great. And he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and many servants, so that the Philistines were jealous of him. Now, all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, while the Philistines stopped up by filling them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are too mighty for us. And Isaac departed from there, encamped in the valley of Gerar, and settled there. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham. But the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he called them by the same names by which his father had called them. Then Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water. And the herdsmen of Gerar contended with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, "The water is ours." So he named the well Esek, because they quarreled with him. Esek meaning, I think, quarreling, oh, contention. Then they dug another well, and they contended over it also. So he called it Sitnah, meaning enmity. Then he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not contend over it. So he named it Rehoboth, meaning broad places. And he said, "At last, Yahweh has made room for us, and we will be fruitful in the land." And he went up from there to Beersheba, and Yahweh appeared to him that night and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your seed for the sake of my servant Abraham." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of Yahweh and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug out a well. Now Abimelech came to him from Gerar with his advisor Ahuzath and Phicol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you?" Then they said, "Well, we see plainly that Yahweh has been with you." So we said, "Let there now be an oath between us, a covenant, between you and us, and let us cut a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, and you have done nothing to you but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of Yahweh." Then he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they arose early, and each swore to the other. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Now it happened on that day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of that city is Beersheba to this day. Beersheba, we'll get to that later. And Esau was 40 years old, and he took as a wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and also Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought bitterness to Isaac and Rebekah. And bringing up the rest of the notes here for you. There are quite a bit in this section. All right, I'm going to scroll back and just read or roll through the notes in the middle here, because it didn't really go along. We've talked about this before, how when there's a dash in the text, like chapter 26, verse 1 through 33, it goes to the very end of the text. It's a nice little synopsis, but sometimes Logos isn't great at keeping up with that as you scroll through it. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll through it here. There are, again, quite a bit of notes in this section. I strongly recommend reading through all of them if you can. If you can't, that's fine, but that's why I pause so that you can... that's why I record them, so that you can pause and come back at them at a later time. And there we go. That's the rest of those notes. Let's go ahead and move on to Matthew chapter 25. Jesus continues. "Then the kingdom of heaven may be compared to 10 virgins, who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now, 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the prudent, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the prudent answered, saying, 'No, there will not be enough for us and for you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. And later the other virgins also came, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open up for us.' But he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I don't know you. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know the day nor the hour. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and handed over his possessions to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. Now I have my own kind of view on this. I think it's kind of these are the gifts of the Holy Spirit which are given to us, because it's the Holy Spirit who chooses what gifts we're given, right? We don't know what we're going to be given out of any of the gifts that are handed out. And there are quite a few people who will take these gifts of God, right, which are immeasurable in what they are, right? Some people have the ability to teach. There's prophecy, which isn't like, going around telling people the end of the world is nigh. It's literally doing what I'm doing here, just, helping you understand what Scripture is. There's people who are teachers. There are people who are overseers, who are good at handling and working with people. Those are typically the elders that you see in your church. The same term for overseer is elder. There are there's one called helps, which is just general helping of other people. There's hospitality. There's administration, like being able to do taxes and do paperwork. That's not me at all, right? But these are other gifts given from God to individual people. You may not even know you have this gifting, but God gives you a gift of different kinds. So when I read through this section, this is what I read it as. I could be totally wrong. Just putting it out there. All right. So what is a talent? Well, a talent is about 15 years of a laborer's wage or wages. So think about how much money you've made for your home in the last 15 years. Now, imagine that the ruler of your land gives you 5 times that amount, because he assumes you're going to be able to do good with it. He assumes this because he knows your abilities. To another one, he's given twice this amount, 30 years' wages, and to another one, 1 talent, 15 years' wages, right? And then he went on his journey. Verse 16, immediately the one who had the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. I've seen these people. They can like flip Bitcoin like that. It's crazy. I'm not that guy. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent, well, he went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed 5 talents over to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful with a few things, but I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Also, the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you handed 2 talents over to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one who also had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you didn't sow and gathering where you gathered no seed, or rather where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. Just hands it right back. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I scattered no seed. Therefore you ought to have at least put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. And throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But when the Son of Man comes, briefly, I get this from reading through quite deeply into um, basically First Corinthians and the whole section on gifts. Putting it out there. We'll get to it eventually. Let's go on. Verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as the shepherds separate. Starting over, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom which has been prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Now, did the goats choose to be goats? No. Did the sheep choose to be sheep? No, but they were elect of God. Verse 35, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Well, then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels." That's a kind of a neat note there. People look at hell, right? Especially the unconverted, they look at hell as a place of partying, right? Oh, we're gonna go hang out with the devil. It'll be a great time. All my friends will be there. I've had friends tell me that. Hell is a place of torment. It's pretty simple, right? But it's not ruled over by the devil, it's ruled over by God. God is absolutely present in hell, but only in pure wrath. No mercy, no loving kindness, just wrath. And I'm not going to say 24/7 or whatever, because there's no existence of time. There's no tomorrow. There's no an hour away. There's no 10 minutes away. It never ends. This is what hell is. It's a place of torment for the devil and his angels. Verse 42, "For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they will themselves also answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, saying, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And those will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. And there's all the notes. Let's move on now to Esther chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what had been decided against her. Then the young men, then the young men of the king who attended to him said, "Let young virgins, beautiful in appearance, be sought for the king, and let the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather every young virgin, beautiful in appearance, to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into the hand of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who keeps charge of the women, and let their cosmetics be given to them. Then let the young lady who is good in the eyes of the king be queen in place of Vashti. And the word was good in the eyes of the king, and he did so. Now, there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew, and his name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been taken away into exile from Jerusalem with the exiles who had been taken away into exile with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had taken away into exile. I don't know if he was in exile. That's what the text. Verse 7, and he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now, the young lady was beautiful in form and beautiful in appearance. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Now it happened that when the word and law of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa, into the hand of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's house, into the hand of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. And the young lady was good in his eyes, and she advanced in loving kindness before him. So he hurried to give her cosmetics and portions of food to her, and to give her 7 choice young women from the king's house. And he transferred her and all her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther did not tell anyone about her people or her kinsmen, for Mordecai had commanded her that she should not tell anyone about them. And every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to know the well-being of Esther and how she fared. Now, when it reached the turn of each young lady to go into King Ahasuerus, after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their cosmetic treatment were fulfilled as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices, and the cosmetics for women. Then the young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything she said she desired was given to her, to come with her from the harem to the king's house. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem, to the hand of Shaashgaz, there we go, the king's eunuch who kept charge of the concubines. She would not again go into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. Now, when it reached the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go into the king, she did not seek anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who kept the charge of the women, said. And Esther advanced in favor in the eyes of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus, to his royal house in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she advanced in favor and loving kindness before him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Then the king held a great feast, Esther's feast, for all his princes and servants. And he also held a remission of taxes for the provinces, and gave gifts according to the king's hand. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet told anyone about her kinsmen or her people, just as Mordecai had commanded her. Indeed, Esther was doing what Mordecai declared that she do, just as she had done when she was being brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs from those who were doorkeepers, became furious and sought to send forth their hand against King Ahasuerus. But the matter became known to Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther said it to the king in Mordecai's name. Then the matter was sought out and found to be true. So they were both hanged on gallows, or on a gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. Why are we saying that? It'll come up shortly. Let's move on now to conclude in Acts chapter 25. Festus then, having arrived in the province, after 3 days went up from Jerusalem to Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were pleading with him, requesting a favor against Paul that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, while they set an ambush to kill him on the way. Well, Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore, said he, let the influential men among you go down there with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them accuse him. And after he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea. And on the next day he took his seat on the judgment seat and ordered Paul to be brought. And after Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him, which they could not prove. While Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no sin either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and to be tried before me on these matters? But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's judgment seat, his tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you yourself very well know. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of these things is true, of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. When Festus had conferred with his council, he answered, you have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you shall go. Now when several days had passed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. Hello, Festus. And while they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there's a man who was left as a prisoner by Felix. And when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. But I answered them that it is not the custom of the Romans to hand over any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face, and has an opportunity to make his defense against the charges. So after they had assembled here, I did not delay, but on the next day I took my seat on the judgment seat, and ordered the man to be brought before me. When the accusers stood up, they were not bringing any charges against him for the evil deeds, as I was expecting. But they had some points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus, a dead man whom Paul asserted to be alive. And being perplexed about how to investigate such matters, I was asking whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there to be tried on these matters. But when Paul appealed to be held in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, well, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, you shall hear him. So, on the next day, when Agrippa came together with Bernice amid great pomp, and entered the hall accompanied by the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at the order of Festus, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all you gentlemen here present with us, you see this man about whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me, both at Jerusalem and here, loudly declaring that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death. Since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him. Yet I have nothing definite to write to my lord, or about him to write to my lord. Therefore I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa. so that after the investigation has taken place, they may have something to write. For it seems to me absurd in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. And with that, I agree with him. All right, that is all of the text and all of the notes for today. So, God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.